You're about as effective as the Canto Bight Police Department.
Hello, welcome to Galactic Initiative. I'm your host, Jeff. David and Sean are with me. Welcome, David.
Hello.
Welcome, Sean.
Hello, my friend.
A less structured format for this show. We will discuss a few topics of the day and just see where the flow takes us. Let's begin. This week we learned Dave Filoni is an executive creative director at Lucasfilm. How do you feel about his promotion?
Long overdue. I'm happy for him. The guy's done some really great work with Star Wars throughout the years. He's not just a flash in the pan, from Rebels to Clone Wars to some of the Bad Batch, although Resistance is questionable, and it obviously has worked for Mando. I mean, he's trending upward, and I'm excited to see what he can do. I hope it's not just a promotion in title. I hope he actually does get power with that executive position and not just get a new name tag and new business cards to pass out.
I have concerns about it, not because of Dave Filoni. We've talked about this before. His success with Star Wars, the quality of the content that he's been putting out. We've all talked about our concerns about Resistance and, of course, the ongoing concerns of Bad Batch. But is this something that Kathleen Kennedy is doing to try and get him to a position where he can't interfere with her? It's kind of weird to me that a company like Lucasfilm, Disney, that has trillions of dollars and thousands upon thousands of staffers, that they can't seem to update their website for a year. This supposedly was a promotion a year ago. So there's something going on over there at Lucasfilm about this. That's the timing of it, and then the reaction to it. Because all the fans hopped on social media and they're like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever! You know, Dave Filoni's finally in charge." And everybody's like, "Oh yeah, this happened a year ago." It's really weird. So I'm of two minds of this. One, yes, Dave Filoni, long overdue. Absolutely, it's deserved. I mean, he should be in charge of a lot of creativity over there at Lucasfilm. But two, it just seems really strange how, once again, Lucasfilm has handled personnel decisions, announcements, and then their real lack of attention to detail when it comes to running their HR stuff.
Speaking of the Bad Batch, we agreed to pause our analysis based on quality. Thoughts on the series after 4 episodes?
I'm on the fence. I mean, the first episode I really enjoyed. Second one, not so much. Third one, I'm okay with, and the last one, not so okay. So I'm feeling like I'm on a roller coaster. Like Jeff pointed out in the previous episode, there are some serious plot holes, and I'm really not enjoying the character development. Omega as well as Wrecker, and I'm really not liking Tech right now. I want more Tarkin. I want more Imperial involvement. I want more of that story. I want to see more of what's going on Kamino and their trials and tribulations. They touched on that a little bit, I think, in episode 3, and then episode 4, they totally didn't say anything about that. I don't think it's a hot mess just yet, but it's trending that way. I know with Rebels, it took the whole season for it to really just kind of get its legs. I'm hoping that's the case here. But I have hopes. I mean, there's some great things. I mean, I will say those scenes with the Resistance were pretty intense. The lasers are they're going through people. It's adding a sense of reality. It's a weird combination of adult visuals, and then you throw in Omega, who's supposed to be your, young adult demographic. So it's an interesting combination, but I'm willing to give it, at least a season, if not a few more episodes into the second season.
Yeah, Bad Batch for me is just feels like it's Resistance with Clone Wars skin. It has no direction right now, and maybe, as David mentioned, perhaps this is just the working out the bugs in the first season. I'm kind of over it. The most interesting part of this entire show for me so far has been the Imperial connection and Kamino. My hope had been that we were going to see more of the Bad Batch going through this issue of trying to find their way in the world and understand their purpose now that war is over, but we're not getting any of that. They've immediately been thrust into this, hey, you're the parents of this super being or whatever, and it's weird. I'm going to continue to watch it, of course, and we'll see where it goes, but they better get around to intriguing us with some of these larger questions and deeper story arcs than just we need to land on the planet and get some supplies, and then Omega gets caught up in some garbage with one of the locals, and it's like, if you just continue to do that every week, this show is going to be worthless. It'll wind up being like Resistance, where we keep hearing about something important over a period of time, but we never actually see it, and then you just unceremoniously cancel the show. And it would really do a disservice to the fans and to Dave Filoni and team, because 7 seasons of Clone Wars, out of those 7 seasons of whatever 100 and some episodes, there's probably maybe only 10 that are really kind of junk. And the percentage of success over failure on that show is very, very high. And this show right now, it's struggling. And it's like the first season of Clone Wars got off to a better start. Like David mentioned, Rebels, it was rough the first season. I'm willing to give the show a benefit of the doubt for the first season, simply because it is difficult when you're creating the characters' personalities and how they interact with one another. Generally, though, you have an overarching story that you're trying to drive to a point, and we haven't seen that yet, and that's it. Why are we here? Tell me why this is important. Tell me why I need to care, and I haven't got to that point yet.
The show suffers from plot holes and terrible pacing. I believe a meaningful plot exists based on the first episode, but like Resistance, we might never experience it if the show continues to destroy its own momentum with repetitive and or irrelevant subplots. 3 consecutive episodes with little to no substance. Omega is naive. The Empire is cracking down. The Bad Batch isn't safe anywhere. Yes, we understand these points. Move along. Where do the problems lie? Dave Filoni as executive producer, Brad Rao as director, Jennifer Corbett as screenwriter, all of the above? What do you think?
I don't know exactly where to lay the blame on this. I am going to lay some blame on Dave Filoni because he's the guy, right? We just talked about how he got promoted. He was promoted a year ago, and this is his baby, right? Clone Wars is his thing. Resistance, we kind of gave Dave Filoni a pass. This is a new thing and whatever, and I'm just kind of advising or whatnot. But he's got his hands all over this bad boy, and we're getting the same content and plotting that we got in Resistance, which is geared towards younger people, and so it's a very confusing mixture. This is what we're getting from him. Now, again, I don't know. Is this something that Kathleen Kennedy said, I want you to make a show for little girls to like Star Wars or whatever. And he's like, well, can I set it at least in the Clone Wars universe? And she's like, yeah, do whatever. Just make it a show for little girls or whatever. And then, so now he's stuck. And maybe this is why Lucasfilm timed this announcement. Maybe this is Kathleen Kennedy getting revenge for his success on The Mandalorian. All the fans, or I would say all the fans, but a significant portion of the fan base is out there right now complaining about bad writing. And they're like, oh, hey, by the way, did you know that we promoted Dave Filoni to be executive producer? Like, are they trying to shift that blame away from Kathleen Kennedy and put it on Dave Filoni so he doesn't look as good as the fans have been making him for so long? Possibly. I mean, it's very Machiavellian, but it starts with him as the top dog. So he needs to get his people in order. As the executive producer, as the leader, as the guy who's the head of creative now at Lucasfilm, right? And you can correct it because it's still ongoing and you're in charge. But if he gets wrapped up in his own arrogance and he's like wants to give us more space whales and all this other stuff, then it's like, okay, this is a miss.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Sean. I mean, if he is truly the executive and he is in charge of the Bad Batch cartoon, which it seems like that is the case, as bad as the story writing is, or the writing in general, he's got to approve it. The buck stops with him. So I'm gonna say he's 1A and she's 1B.
An interesting Machiavellian conspiracy theory. It's a great question. Why now? Anyway, let's move on to our next section. After its latest retcon, this one involving the Kanan comic series, Disney again sparks the question, does canon matter? To be fair, George Lucas's revisualizations led to retcons. Sean has distinguished a canon hierarchy with live action at the top and comics at the bottom. I agree with his assessment, but Disney is apparently abandoning the sequel trilogy as we speak. Where do you stand? Does canon matter? How far down the hierarchy do you go before you begin to question legitimacy?
it doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, the first Bad Batch to me is extremely frustrating. If you're going to tell me that if this comic that I'm going to read about Kanan is going to consider that as his backstory, then when you go and you change things, it's extremely frustrating and it's a lot more confusing. It's just like, man, get your stories right, get your facts straight, because a lot of us are extremely passionate about that, and we do not enjoy having our minds messed with. I can't invest my time reading the comics or reading the novels or whatever, and then have them be retconned within a year or two. I mean, I still enjoy the expanded universe. I still enjoy a lot of those puzzle pieces that are out there. But I think Lucas obviously threw away the notion of canon. Yeah, it's just frustrating.
George Lucas didn't care about canon except for what was on the big screen. Even his own canon, right? He wrote, directed, and released Episode 4, which was not even Episode 4 at the first time. It was just Star Wars. And then when he got success, he had to write or come up with an idea for Empire Strikes Back. And just between those two films, forget all the stuff that has occurred before and since, from Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker having a burgeoning romance in Episode 4 to being related in Episode 5, maybe 6, right? But we carried that through line with them kissing at the beginning of the film, and then at the end there's this weird force connection between the two of them, and we're not really sure what's going on. Then you start to look at the marketing and the merchandising in that era. The novel, the Alan Dean Foster novel Splinter of the Mind's Eye, for example, is a huge continuity problem. The Marvel comics follow the storyline. They took the romance between Leia and Luke very seriously, and some of that stuff is very awkward to go back and read. So the problem with canon has been there since the beginning. So now we flash forward to what we have here, and I think that the big frustration, for the first time in the history of Star Wars, we had a very definitive conversation and statement regarding canon. Lucas was always like, oh yeah, we got fan films and we got all this stuff and just books and there's novels and the movies are the thing and all this other stuff is just stuff and it's fun. But Disney showed up with a bag of cash and said, okay, all that fun that came before is now quote unquote legends. And what we're doing now is going to be tightly interwoven, and we're going to have a group of people working together to make sure that we have continuity, a cross-media distribution of story that is all canon, all correct, and all interwoven, right? And then they've now started to contradict themselves. The Kanan is one example, the Kanan comic. The next example would be the Ahsoka Tano novel. And because we only have a limited amount of resources, including time and money, we have to go with the movies, and then the next thing would be the cartoons, and then somewhere way down on the food chain is the novels and the comic books. That stuff is constantly getting cycled. But instead of them just saying when they bought it, hey, we're gonna continue the continuity of the films, they're the ones that dropped the hammer and gave us these rules, and now we're mad that they're not following the rules. Lucas handled it in a much better way that was more friendly to the fans. So it's like, if you were a big fan of the Rogue Squadron comics, or if you were a big fan of the Jedi Academy books or the whatever, like, you had a place. You had a place in fandom, and you could just love it and live it, and that was your thing, and nobody cared. Now I feel like I've been taken advantage of as a consumer.
So I guess I have a choice, and I've reached the point of headcanon. I enjoy certain narratives, certain novels, comics. No label, no declaration will reduce my enjoyment or diminish my commitment. My favorite novel, Shatterpoint, is part of Legends. It's no longer canon. I don't care. I reread it once a year. I love it. Quick shout out to Matthew Stover for Shatterpoint and the novelization of Revenge of the Sith, both excellent. And if the pieces don't fit perfectly together, and I love continuity, don't get me wrong, and I want scaffolding, and I like complexity. I love Easter eggs. So I would love everything to flow perfectly, but I don't need announcements from a corporation to direct me towards certain content and away from others.
So you've gone off and you're over in your corner with your stuff that you like, and you're picking and choosing. And what they're trying to do is, as a corporation, they're trying to direct you to go out there and get everything, right? You are, you are not performing as the corporation wants you to perform. They want you to be the full consumer. They want you to buy all these things. And it's through their own actions that they're making you adverse to that.
And this is interesting. If you want to know where many of the writers for the High Republic series came from, they came from the comics. The last two series, the last two that I picked up just a few days ago, both authors are part of the High Republic story group.
The fact that there is a very small group of people who are currently creating all the content makes it even that much more frustrating that they can't seem to get their story straight. I would let it go in Legends, or the previous iteration of Star Wars, 50 novelists and 3 or 4 writers for a comic book and a whole bunch of different artists and all these things going on. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's going to get muddled. But when you have 5 people writing all the stories for your movies, your cartoons, your TV shows, your comic books, and your novels, and they can't get that straight, that's a problem. That's like a serious problem. Poke your head over the top of your cubicle and be like, hey, man, I'm going to kill Chewbacca in this book. Is that cool? Or you got him on the thing next week. And that guy be like, no, you can't do it, man. He's going to be in Rebels next month. Oh, okay, cool. Right on. I'll just keep writing. That would be much easier, you would think, with 5 people in a room locked away somewhere, creating all your canon. But those 5 people locked in that room still can't even talk to each other enough to figure out that the TV show that they're making just blew up the novel that you released last month, which blew up the comic book that came out the month before that.
Yeah, all true. Okay, I've encountered tales about the return of Gina Carano. Do you believe she will or won't return? Do you want her to return?
Yes, I have read many different articles regarding her imminent return. Do I want her to return? Absolutely, because I think it's a great character, a great original character that they've created. To have her not be in, to continue on, I think would be a shame. If I'm Gina Carano, though, am I willing to put myself out there and go through that again? I'm not so sure. With the announcement of the Rangers not in active development, I think that is unfortunately a bad sign for her. It's obvious that they were setting her up to be the lead in the show. I think the only way that you potentially get her back, I think if the other people in Disney are held to the same standard that she was held to regarding social media, but I'm not sure that if I'm Gina Carano, I want to go down that route.
Yeah, I've heard all the rumors about her coming back, and I'm hopeful they're true, but I don't think it's happening. The two indicators to me of why she's not coming back. The first one is immediately after being canceled by Disney, she signed a production deal with Ben Shapiro and Daily Wire. I think for a lot of people in the land of Disney and in the hierarchy of Disney and the politics of California, that is kind of a bridge too far. The fact that she was aligning herself with a very conservative content provider and a political activist. The other thing is that Drunk 3PO, whom I'm insanely jealous of because he seems to be spending a lot of time with Gina Carano in his personal life right now. He just released a video in the last several days basically saying she's not coming back. Now, he's actually developed a friendship with her, and he has had her on his show several times, and they talk regularly. He has more access to her than we all do. The other thing is that money talks. An apology and a sack of money, she'd show up. But I think to David's point, with the fact that the show is not being worked on right now, it's not being developed, the fact that people who are close to the situation are not saying that she's coming back. And so, I mean, that makes me sad. I love her character. I love the role she played on Mandalorian. And the crew on Mandalorian have all said that they've enjoyed working with her and that she's a pleasure to be around. Favreau has said that he created the character specifically for her. So I don't know what that does. Does that hamstring the entire storyline? Does it hurt Favreau's idea of how to tell this massive epic tale? I don't know. But we can do all these other shows while we're hashing out the situation with Gina Carano. And it's got to be It's got to happen if you want to do the Rangers of the New Republic show. There's fertile ground here for the rumors, right? Because things that have gone before are now being reversed. For example, the allowance of the retro series of action figures to be released by Hasbro, which includes a Cara Dune figure. It's the only Cara Dune figure that has not been pulled or has been discontinued. That's an interesting sign. The other interesting thing is, after having canceled the episode, they did allow the Running Wild with Bear Grylls episode with Gina Carano to be aired on National Geographic Channel. Why would they reverse that? And so I think this is the stuff that's giving us this. I don't know if it's false hope or if it's a very slight glimmer of hope or whatever. But these are things that are being done that could be overtures. And of course, she's a class act, right? When they reinstated the episode of the Bear Grylls show, she was very effusive in her praise for him and for the show and how excited she was that everybody, the fans, were going to get to see it, and she was really proud of the work that she did on that show. Like, she's been class act about this whole thing the whole time. So those are the things that are happening right now that give rise to that hope that we have, that there's a possibility that the door has been opened for her return. But it's like we've all said, what is it going to take her to cross the threshold?
David, this next one's primarily for you. Disney changed the dates of Star Wars Celebration 2022. Previously August 18th through the 21st, now May 26th through the 29th. Disney offered a one-sentence explanation. Quote, "In order to provide the best fan experience possible, and after further consideration with our hotel and venue teams, we have made the decision to adjust the dates." End quote. That's it. So what happened? What prompted the change? And without crying over first world problems, David, tell us, how have you been affected?
I think ReedPop is running out of cash. I think that's one of the reasons why it got moved up. Even though they have my money from my 4-day pass, all their conventions have been either delayed, canceled, moved back. I think they had to move it up due to financial issues. How did that affect me? Well, it was in a really sweet spot for me in August. So when it was moved, and it also happens to be the weekend before my wife's birthday, I was not happy. But for one, it's a busier holiday weekend that I would be traveling. I don't get an opportunity to travel very often, and this was my one opportunity to do something and enjoy it with friends that are Star Wars fanatics. But after talking it over with my wife, we came to a compromise that I would still be able to attend the event all the different days. But my time frame to being able to go to Disneyland has definitely shrunk, which I absolutely want to go see the Falcon. I'd pay a couple $100 to go see that for a day and just sit there and stare at it. But yeah, I was a little shocked and shaken by the announcement that took place. I just find it really unusual for any type of convention or big event like this to be moved forward instead of backward.
I would say that attending large conventions like this, big gatherings for whatever your fandom is, Star Wars Celebration or San Diego Comic-Con or things like that, it is a significant financial commitment for the fans, and it's also a significant time commitment. And people have to spend a long time planning for this stuff, getting time off from work, saving the money, a reservation at a hotel that isn't going to bankrupt you, getting airfare for some people. And so you start moving these dates around and you make it difficult for a significant portion of the fans to actually attend. If I have a year to save for this event or 2 years to save for this event, and now you're telling me it's happening earlier, I either have to become more aggressive in my savings if I can, or I'm out because I can't save enough. An already finite resources of hotels and other lodgings is going to be diminished. So you're making it even harder on the people who can't afford to go and want to go, just because you have a scarcity. You're in Southern California. It's a holiday weekend. People travel. You're now competing with other people who might not necessarily be a part of the celebration. So it becomes very difficult moving it up. Moving it back is also frustrating, but it actually becomes a better situation for the people who it is a significant financial strain for to go to these things. It's going to ultimately impact a lot of people and preclude them from participating in the event who want to be there. Now, to the Reed Pop question, and so they bought Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle, which is something that I've attended pretty much every year that it's been a convention. And since Reed Pop bought it, it has become terrible. It's been poorly managed. The focus of the convention has shifted to celebrities and high ticket, quote unquote, fan experiences, and really trying to just milk the public for a lot of money. And it's pushed out a lot of local participants, local comic book artists, local businesses that sell there, whether they be comic shops or toy stores or some combination of that. Perhaps Reed Pop think more about the fans and the consumers of these events as opposed to the table prices. And over the last several years, they've just gotten outrageous. I mean, the larger table prices for some of these retailers, these comic shops, $5,000-$6,000 for a weekend for a table. It's priced everybody out. Reed Pop taking over Celebration. I don't know. I have not been to Celebration, so I don't know if their stewardship of Star Wars Celebration has been equally disappointing. The only reason why I would go there is for the collecting aspect, and that there are things that happen in the neighborhood around Celebration that to me are far more compelling than the celebration itself. David talks about some of the collecting groups that are going to be down there. Some of the groups the circles that we move in. There's the room sales, and there's all these things where people are trading very unique celebration specific stuff that they've created. The various clubs come up with fun things to hand out and trade with other clubs. I mean, that to me is the real compelling thing.
So, switching gears, we are recording this show in late May, the time of year that always calls good Star Wars memories to mind. Premiere dates for the OT and prequels. What is your fondest movie-going memory involving those films?
The original trilogy, of course, seeing it for the first time and all of that, I mean, very exciting. And I think that the anticipation of Empire Strikes Back, having waited the 3 years for that movie and all of the playing with the toys and reading the comics and building our own headcanon and all that kind of stuff, and the anticipation and the craziness of that. It was like Christmas, right? Getting those films. It was all of that wrapped up into an afternoon of showing up with your friends and seeing those movies in the theater. That's what we live for. With the prequel trilogy, it was a very similar thing. I remember, after the special editions came out, and then they were talking about the prequels and all that stuff, and the anticipation of the build up to episode 1 for me was huge. We talked about this in our other recordings. It felt like you were 10 again. And so it's hard for me to put a finger on one specific event. I mean, the first Star Wars came in May because it was the first Star Wars, and there was no real like, oh my God, it's May kind of a thing. But then Star Wars, of course, as we all know, I mean, we're grown men doing a podcast about space wizards. I don't know. I think maybe as a young adult, I seeing, being a part of the hype for episode 1 is probably the most memorable, because I was a small child when the original movies came out. I more remember the later films in the original trilogy being an exciting and anticipation of those films coming out. But it's part of this lifetime of excitement over the whole franchise.
So I would have to agree with Sean. I mean, episode 1 is the most recent one that I got hyped for. I do remember the Empire was in Tacoma, Return of the Jedi was at Center Plaza 6 in Federway, and then episode 1 was in Spokane in the Valley. I remember I remember specifically for the original series with Return of the Jedi, not so much with Empire, just because I was 6 years old and I was a young pup. But I remember waiting outside to get into Return of the Jedi and kept on looking up at the screen and like double taking, making sure that it was actually happening that day. And I mean, I remember going in and out of the theater like 4 times just to make sure that I was in the right theater and that I wouldn't miss an absolute second. And it was a lot of fun.
Our discussion of everything has come to an end. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, David.
Great to be here.
Thank you, Sean.
General Kenobi.
Galactic Initiative is not authorized or endorsed by Lucasfilm Limited. The name Star Wars and all related materials are registered trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, all rights reserved. Galactic Initiative is a registered trademark, and other product and company names are trademarks of their respective holders. Use does not imply affiliation or endorsement.